Good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join us for this webinar. My name is Sue-Ann Howardson, and I'm a dairy scientist at AHDB Dairy. AHDB is delighted to bring you tonight's webinar, Preparing for Change, Characteristics of Top Performing Farms. Our presenter today is Luke Crossman, a Senior Analyst at AHDB. Luke will be presenting their findings from comparing farms of varying size through individual farm data to allow smaller farms with minimal turnover to be compared equally to larger farms. During his presentation, Luke will provide an overview of the key success factors of top performance. Tonight's webinar has proved very popular with over 200 registration from farmers, vet, consultants and others. We will aim to keep the webinar running smoothly, but please bear with us if we do run into any technical difficulties. Luke's presentation will take around 25 minutes, and then there will be time for comments and questions at the end. You will all stay muted throughout the webinar, but if anyone would like to ask a question, then please type your question into the box on the left-hand side of your screens. I will ask Luke your questions at the end of his presentation, and we will aim to finish within an hour. So without further delay, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker for tonight. Luke joined AHDB in 2012 after graduating from Harper Adams University, starting off as a junior analyst in dairy. After 6 years, he made the switch to the policy team as a senior analyst looking across all sectors. So without further delay, it's over to you, Luke.
Cheers, Sue-Ann, and evening all. Thank you again for attending. Tonight we'll be talking about the characteristics of top performing farms, and I'll just give a quick background of how this work came about. Some of you may have seen the Horizon document that we had on this, and it was essentially the idea came about as we've constantly talked over the years about the top and the bottom in terms of financials, and we'll go into that a little bit tonight, but this is more about, well, why are the top of the top and what sort of things they do that maybe others don't do as well, and kind of how to get in that mindset of change to really look at sort of self-assessment on farm to push towards that top quartile level. So to start with, we'll look at that financial aspect. So the report said, and these are kind of comparing comparable farm elements to this. So it's not like just comparing the top 25 against the bottom 25, but they're the kind of linked farms, if you like. So they're very comparable in what their farm size and bits and pieces like that are. And there's a huge difference, as you can see, in their farm business income, with the top nearly £100,000 more achievable in their farm business income than the bottom. And that table shows sort of selected variables that are significantly different. And all of that sort of stuff is kind of what has been talked about a lot over the years, and what especially AHDB have done over the years. But really, we want to delve into the actual characteristics and the mindset that the top performers tend to have. So all of this is available in more detail than is shown on your screen, but this is just to give you a bit of context over kind of what are the sort of key aspects of the makeup of farm business income that affects the top compared to the bottom, and what that kind of means overall. So we'll start off, and this is the report that you can see on the left-hand side of your screen. You may have seen it already. It came out in September 2018. It's available on the website. And like I said, it goes into kind of reasons why the top are the top. We did it in collaboration with Anderson's, and it's been quoted as having something for everyone. It's important to say we're not here to preach this is how you should farm and you should be doing all these sorts of things, but it's more of a guide as saying kind of, well, have a little look at kind of what you're doing at the moment. Is there things that you might consider doing slightly differently? How does it fit in with this? And is there tools and other bits and pieces that we've got or other people have that's available to use to help you push in the right direction that you're looking to go to with your farm business? So these are the 8 key factors that are shown on your screen now. I'm going to go into them in more detail in a moment, and then talk about a piece of further work we've done that looks at dairy specific towards the end of this presentation. So firstly, minimizing overheads. Now, this is probably something that everyone's heard for years and years and time again, just cut costs, cut costs, cut costs. And it is a bit of a boring message to keep pushing out there, and it's probably a very boring message to keep hearing. But essentially, that minimizing overheads is something that those high performers and those improved performers, if they were to give advice to other people looking at what they want to do, is the number one thing. Because that's the only thing really that you've got fundamentally in control of is your cost. When you look at the output price, pretty much everyone, unless you're doing specific things on your own, it really is just down to markets and down to other people that dictate what price you get for your outputs. So controlling your inputs is the key. And as the quote says there at the bottom, higher output accounts for just 10 to 30% of higher profits in top quartile farm businesses, but lower costs contribute to 65 to 90% of that. So really delving into the costs, and not just a blanket, well, let's see how much we can shave off of it, but going into the marginal detail of that, which is a kind of a thought process that we'll come on to in a bit. But essentially, that is the number one thing that those top performers would suggest is the first port of call, is to tackle the cost side of things. So setting goals and budgets. If I'm doing this sort of presentation at a meeting, this is where I kind of ask people, well, what they currently do, get a gauge in a room of who does budgets, who does cash flows, who kind of looks at their goals and aspirations of the business, where they want to go, and set themselves targets and sort of key performance indicators to measure themselves of where they're getting there. And from this graph, it shows that actually that from the bottom, there's not that many people that do that. But actually from the top as well, the percentages aren't massive. But again, this is something that those top guys are doing a lot better, and it does seem to be a factor that's working a lot more in terms of bank managers as well. And from what we've seen and what we've heard is that previously you've probably gone to banks and requested loans or extensions, so overdrafts, and it's more dependent on sort of security that can be achieved against that. But more and more it's becoming about, well, what's the business mindset of that owner? What are they presenting? Are they just saying, oh, I need an extension on a loan because I want to get a shed? Or is it a case of, well, I want to get a shed because these are the reasons why I want to get the shed. This is how I see my budget changing over the years and what I'm going to achieve from obtaining that, and that's why I need the loan. So having that financial aspect in those budgets is good for a number of reasons, but having a goal set as well, having that clear vision of where you want to go with that business, and getting everyone involved in that business along for that ride, gives a sort of heightened focus of what you want to do and where you want to go, and it gives everyone that idea of how to achieve it as well, by setting those targets and those KPIs to make sure you're kind of on that journey. And this is also important to say, it's not a case of doing these things once, chucking them in the drawer and maybe looking at them in a year, but keeping on top of them, keeping focus of what how you're performing against these budgets and targets, and if you're not performing against them, well, why is that? What are the factors driving that, and how can you get back on track? But also, if you're performing ahead of the game, understanding those reasons as well is crucial. Whether it's outside influence or whether it's direct things you're doing, if you can look at that as you're progressing along, it gives you a better focus on how to to get back on track, and how to establish the things you're doing well as well. So comparing yourself with others and gathering information, essentially benchmarking. As you can see the quote from Albert Einstein there, we should not expect to achieve different results by doing the same thing. And that's kind of key really for business progression, because essentially if you believe you're a top-notch business right now and you're going to keep doing exactly the same thing you're doing for year and year and year, the industry is evolving, the political landscape is definitely evolving and changing. It might be that actually in sort of 3-5+ years time, if you keep doing exactly what you're doing, you might be falling behind the curve. So really understanding your business, your how you're progressing each year, is sort of the key starting point for some of this stuff to see where you compare each year, what are the reasons behind those changes, and that also helps to inform your budgeting, your cash flows for future progressions, to see what have you done and how can you evolve the business. Now, that kind of comparing yourself with others is, for me, a really important aspect of this, because essentially you may feel like you're either on your own or your business is unique, but there's lots of people in a similar situation. Obviously every farm is completely different, every person is completely different, but there are similarities that you can pick and choose from people and adapt to your business. And I'll talk about that adaptation quite a lot, purely because of that uniqueness to you. You can't look at someone and go, that's a great idea, I'm just going to pick it up and run with it, because it might not work. There might be certain factors that you need to look into a bit more, and going to benchmark discussion groups and bits and pieces like that really help hone those ideas in and understand the challenges that other people have had, to see, well, what challenges might you expect and how can you change things as well, slightly differently. And until you really understand those financial aspects of what your farm is at the moment, doing budgets and cash flows and things like that is actually it becomes a lot harder. So it's a great starting point to kind of linking to other aspects of these characteristics from top performers. Now, understanding the market. Now, this kind of comes in two different visors, really. So the first one is a case of, where is your product going? Now, we're constantly told that the end consumer is the be all and end all. And while that's true to a degree, because they do try drive the trends for new products and where they go and what demand they're looking for at the kind of the retail shelf level, fundamentally, it's actually whoever you're selling your milk to is your number one consumer. So whether that's a processor or whether that is straight from farm to the products that you make, whoever you're selling your milk directly to is your number one customer. So engaging with them, making sure that whatever contract spec they've got in place, you're getting the top spec to that, is fundamental to getting the best possible price. And like we previously kind of mentioned, most people aren't in control of what price they actually get as an overall, but what you are in control of is making sure you can get the best possible out of those contracts and those chats that you would have with that customer and that process, or whoever it might be. So always think of them not as, I would suggest not thinking of them as a buyer, but thinking of them as a customer and seeing what it is they're after and how can you achieve that in the best possible way that suits them but also suits you. And that's the fundamental as well, is that you shouldn't massively change your business to suit someone else, but you should adapt what you're kind of doing slightly to make sure you are achieving that. So if you're kind of looking at your contract at the moment and thinking, well, actually this isn't necessarily suiting what I'm looking to do, then maybe it's not the right contract and maybe you need to start looking elsewhere. Now, I understand that's easier for others depending on location, but it's definitely something to be thinking about and really looking into. Now, it's not just about the output side of things, it's all about the input side of things as well. Looking at what's happening with the fertilizer market, the feed market, where are they going? If the prices were to change by sort of 5-10% in the next 6 months, how would that impact your business? And stress testing those budgets as well. So rather than just doing my average milk price over the past sort of 3 years is, say, 26 pence a litre. So I'm going to budget that in for the next sort of 12 months. We're saying, well, if your output price was to change sort of 5% negatively, but your inputs prices change 5% positively, what would that mean for your gross margin? And combining these sort of first four elements we talked about in terms of minimizing overcosts, benchmarking, setting budgets and goals, and understanding the market, and really linking them all together to make them work fluidly, is a real big thing for what the top performers seem to be doing, better than compared to the bottom performers. Focusing on now, this is looking essentially at marginal gains. Now, this was very much popularized in the sort of 2020 Olympics with the GB cycling team. where they looked at every little bit of what they were doing in terms of how the bike was made, what materials it was made out of, the tire pressure, the tread on it, all these little bits and pieces that actually, if you took them in isolation, wouldn't do a massive amount of good. They'd get a little bit better if they changed it, but for the money and the time they're putting in for it, individually probably wouldn't be worth what they got. But as a collective, it was a massive, massive impact to what they were doing. And that's what this focus to detail is all about, is looking at every single aspect of what you're doing as a business, how you can tweak things, how you can change things slightly and get a little bit here. So as previously talked about in terms of contracts, getting a little bit more on your contract for the mill price. Doing that in combination with other bits and pieces can really, really help to provide a overall powerful gain in what you're looking to achieve on the business. Now, it's not to say that every little thing, if when you look at the focus, when you focus on the detail, it's not to say that you might end up doing things that have a negative impact elsewhere on the business. But if you're focusing on all those little details, if anything you do or anything you change goes slightly wrong, you're going to pick it up a lot quicker than if, say, you do a bit of a big change and it has a negative impact, but it's a small one to start with. That will build up over time. But if you're concentrating on all the little details and you're really looking at those different financial aspects of what's going on, or the technical aspects that feed into the financials, you can really see where those changes might affect and how you can tweak those as you move along to limit the damage of negative change, but boost the positive of that boost the positive change that you can create with this method. Now, having a mindset for change and innovation, this to me is probably one of the most important ones, because if you're not willing to look at things differently and assess the landscape in a different manner, then you're not going to change. You're not going to look at anything new, and you're probably in a few years' time going to be left behind a little bit to where the industry is evolving. Really understanding that ability to look at new ideas, to look at new ways of working, to if you're not currently benchmarking, overcoming those hurdles to why that's a problem, discussing with other people over what reasons why they're doing it, and really kind of broadening horizons allows those top performers to be a lot better than those in the bottom quartile. So attending discussion groups, I mean, farmer to farmer learning is probably the best way to talk about these new ideas and talk about different ways of tackling problems. It might be that I mean, I've been at meetings recently where people have said that they joined a discussion group thinking, well, this is my problem, this is unique to me. But actually, when they've chatted to people about it, it's everyone's in the same problem, everyone's in the same situation, and they try together to tackle those goals. Because even though we've probably in agriculture been in the mindset of as you know, as long as I'm getting a better price than my neighbor, or my neighbor is my direct competitor, that isn't really the case. Our competitors are across the world. We need to kind of work a bit better together to achieve a better industry. And those kind of small steps of looking at, well, actually, let's speak to people in like-minded businesses or on similar contracts or trying to do similar things to open up our minds a little bit more is key to everything that we kind of be talking about today. And to be fair, every new technique that could be coming out, or every new policy decision in the next sort of however long. And on the innovation side of things, this isn't a case of having to be the early adopter in every new little innovation that comes about, but it's about understanding kind of what's coming out, how it could impact you, or what you might want to look at doing to see what's out there and see how you can adapt that to your business, or those new ideas and new thoughts to your business. And continue improvement of people management. Now, for those that employ people, this is potentially about having more formal chats with them about, well, what is it they're looking to achieve out of their career? Where are they looking to go? How can that fit in with your business, and how can you facilitate some of that stuff, whether it's increased responsibility in certain areas, whether it's training, or whether it's just a better sort of work-life balance. And obviously, sometimes it's quite hard to do that with the day-to-day and making time of it. But fundamentally, we are at some point, depending on whatever happens with the dreaded B word, going to be in some sort of challenge when it comes to recruiting labour. Now, our biggest competitor for labour is it's been researched to be the construction industry, which pays a lot more than agriculture. So we don't want to be in a position where we're going to have to massively increase wages to do that. So staff satisfaction is a great way to start. If you're currently not doing bits and pieces like that, then having those discussions with your member of staff of what is it they're looking to achieve, and bringing them along with the common goal of the business is crucial. But also not just with what's happening with staff, but also whoever's involved in the business, whether it's family members or whatever, getting those involved as well, seeing what it is people want to do. Is there certain areas of the business they're more interested in than others? Is there certain training courses or whatever they're wanting to go on, or yourselves are wanting to go on, to help boost your own feeling towards the business, feeling towards the industry, and feeling towards what it is you're doing? Gives you that enjoyment factor, that new lease of life, if you like, so you're not constantly doing the same thing over and over again, but it's actually becomes a bit more varied and a bit more interesting. Now, specializing isn't a case of, if you currently got a few different farm ventures or you're just a dairy farmer, but you've got some diversification as well. It isn't just a case of drops one of them and focus on the other. It's largely about skills utilization. So looking at your business currently, what's working well at the moment, what isn't working so well, understanding what isn't working well and how you can adapt and change that to either, for some things it might be a case of stopping them, but other things it might be a case of changing tact a little bit and then bringing that into a case of where it is working well. But in terms of the skills utilization, it's understanding whoever's connected with the business, who's got the best skills in certain areas and what is it that they're doing. So one of the key examples in terms of what I've heard over the past few months is farmers doing their own accounts. Some necessarily haven't got the skill set to do it well and timely, so they're taking quite a lot of time to do it, and it's becoming aggravating, it's annoying. But actually, if they were to pay someone, it would take a lot less time. Their time would be spent better elsewhere in the farm, and so overall it provides a much better position for the business. But it's not just about the sort of financial side of things, it could be about the technical side of things as well. So in terms of milking, is there someone that actually milks a lot better than other people? So would it be better if person A, who is a much better milker, focuses on that while person B does other jobs around the farm that maybe their skill set is more applicable to? Or is it a case of analysing, well, where are the skills gaps on the farm, and how can you better that upskill people to deal with that, so you can specialise the mindset a little bit more in terms of, well, what is it that the business is looking for, and how can it be achieved? And a large part of that can be achieved from attending discussion groups and sharing ideas with other people. If maybe you're not that comfortable sharing it with people involved in the business, but that for me would be the first port of call, is to look at it from a business specific point. Who's involved, understanding who's looking to do what are people looking to achieve, and try and tie that into a bit of a common goal, and then you can look at what other people are doing and try and adapt some of those ideas into your business as well. Now, we're hoping to publish a new report soon, but it will be kind of introduced into a lot of the kind of way of thinking that comes out of AHDB that we've gone into this a bit further and done sector specific stuff, because everything we kind of talked about is very generic, and this kind of presentation is because it's essentially all about the individual, about it's what you're looking to achieve, how you're looking to get there, and how we can help you get there. But for dairy, the kind of three key ones that came out as that maybe should be the first focus point, if you haven't looked at any of this stuff before, is that benchmarking, comparing yourself with others and gathering information, the continued improvement of people management, and specializing. Also, with this new report comes out these tips for consideration. So it's like 100+ ways of business development and being a better business. Now, this isn't a case of you must be doing all these 100 things again, but it's just questions to kind of see, to prompt thinking on farm about, well, what it is you're doing, why are you doing that, and how can you progress maybe slightly better to get to where you are looking to go with that goal that you've got in mind. So I haven't got actually a fixed date on that as such, but but realistically it kind of goes into those characteristics a bit more. And that report that you can see again on your left hand side is available on the website. It's got lots more information than the kind of generic overview that I've given you tonight around those characteristics. We have case studies in terms of specific farms, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how they've maybe adapted as well to dragging some of these characteristics through to focus their mindset a lot more in achieving where they are. So this isn't a case of, again, here's a report, read it and go off and do your own thing. We have got lots and lots of information on the website through various publications and various tools as well. And the key one for me to really highlight at the moment is the business planning tools. We've got lots of stuff there that if you haven't looked at business plans and budgets and things like that, there's tools available on the website for a sort of starter for 10, if you like. There's lots of information on there about Brexit as well, of how that might affect the industry, and we'll continually massively looking at that over the next sort of few months as we get closer to Brexit date number 3, 31st of October. And everything that we've got here is designed to help you make an informed business decision of where you're looking to go, how you're looking to get there. So all these tools, like I say, are available on the website. If there's anything that you can't find that you want, or you are struggling with maybe some interpretation of, then please do get in contact with myself. It says cereals and oilseeds on the bottom right hand corner. I apologize for that. It should say dairy, but feel free to get in contact with myself or anyone in our team, or your local knowledge exchange manager, and really engage with us to utilize those tools and those resources as much as possible. So I do hope there was something in there tonight that you have got a take-home message or something to think about. This isn't a definitive here's what's going on with this or that. This is more of a thought-provoking thing, and hopefully that has done that tonight. So thank you for listening, thank you for attending, and now we'll open up to any questions you may have.
Thanks, Luke. That was really interesting. While I'm waiting for some questions to come up, so I'll just remind you that you can type these in the little chat box on your screen. I'd just like to remind you that tonight's presentation has been recorded and will be available to watch back on the AHDB YouTube channel, along with all our previous webinars. So the first question that we've got up is from Matthew. Is it essential to use a consultant for budgeting and formal planning, or where can we develop these skills ourselves?
So that's it's very much, if you're comfortable doing these things by yourself, there are tools available both on AHDB website and other sources to give you a basic sort of cash flow, if you like. Consultants are very useful from kind of helping you set out that farm business aspect to those. But it does come down to how comfortable you are with facts and figures. Essentially, we do have that sort of facility that if it's something you want to look at more, then we can help that with. If you're involved with a discussion group, an HDB discussion group, we can set up a more of a budget focused meeting to go through those bits and pieces. But it does come down to the individual of how comfortable you are looking through figures. But the more and more you get involved with it, rather than leaving it to someone else, the more and more comfortable you'll become with it. So I definitely say, even if you're using consultants to start with, really try and firm up your understanding on those, so you can, even if you still use consultants over time, you at least a lot more comfortable with those figures.
Great, thanks, Luke. You mentioned that joining a discussion group. We've just had a few questions in on how do I find a discussion group. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, so on the AHDB Dairy website, there is a section about contacting your team, and it breaks it down into regions, so you can see who your local extension manager, knowledge exchange manager, sorry, is. If you're not necessarily familiar with the website, then please, my details are on the screen. Drop me a line with where you are, and I can put you in contact with the relevant person. It doesn't have to be all through HDB. If there's a group of you that want to set your own up, we can help facilitate that as much as you want. But don't feel like because this is an HB thing, you have to go through us. There's various vets and I suppose sort of feed merchants and consultants that will have discussion groups as well. So speak to people in the local area to see what maybe is already available, but definitely speak to us about who the local knowledge exchange manager is, if you're not engaging with already, to see if there is anything set up, or if we can set something up more local to you.
Great, thanks, Luke. And just to add to that as well, if you do lose Luke's contact details, you can email the web address on the email you got through for the webinar, and then we'll be able to pass your contact details on. A next question, Luke, is that so you mentioned that the 8 key points, and then you highlighted the top 3. We've just got a question on those top 3. If people are not doing any of them, which one do you recommend they should start with, and which one will get the greatest effect?
If you're not doing any of them at the moment, I would suggest starting with benchmarking. It's important to understand where your business is, where it has been, and where you're looking to go. So really look at your individual year-on-year changes, understand why they have changed, and then start looking at, well, where are you looking to go with your business, and get involved with benchmarking in terms of where others are and what they're doing. Benchmarking is fantastic in terms of getting your financial results and seeing where you are, but it's only fantastic if you push on with it, delve into the detail, and really discuss what other people are doing as well, because you could see numbers to say, well, someone else has got a much lower feed cost than you do, but actually that could just purely be down to slightly different systems, different setups, and it might be that in that comparable side of things, it's not as comparable until you actually chat through to understand a bit more about why people are doing things differently. So benchmarking for me would be the best starting point, because you get those figures and you can really delve into it and then start asking more and more questions as you go along.
Great, thank you. There's another question following on from those 3 top points that you're mentioning, and just asking, are top performance doing all three, or are there some of them that would be just doing one of them?
Well, it does vary business to business. Some of the things may not be as applicable, but majority of the top performers would be doing not just all those three, but all those eight. Now, there will be some top performers that aren't necessarily benchmarking or aren't necessarily going to discussion groups or things like that, but it's essentially, it is down to you and what you're looking to achieve individually. And if you are either know that you're not in the top percentage, top 25, or if you don't feel that you are or want to strive further, I wouldn't look at it as a case of, well, who's doing exactly what. I would look at it as more of, how can I use this to help me push forward.
Perfect, thank you. There's a few questions coming through on the focusing on detail. So the first one that's come through is asking, is this implementing lean management? And then the other one is, if you start focus on detail, which part of the business do you recommend that they start looking at to begin with?
So yes, lean management is one way of definitely looking at it, and essentially that's kind of where it is about sort of trimming it down to a degree. But focusing on detail is slightly different in the sense that it might be that you're not looking at the detail to trim it down and to be leaner in what you're doing, but you're focusing on the detail to understand what is going on with that. Because in certain scenarios, you might be looking at either, I don't know, increasing the herd size or expanding a new shed or something like that, which in terms of lean might not necessarily fit into the category. But if you're focusing on the details of what you're doing, how you're doing it, it allows you to see the effect that those little changes could have, or those on the bigger picture, or what the bigger picture might have a knock-on effect to. And in terms of where to start, cost is the biggest one for me. Look at what your cost element is, focus on the detail of that, how you can maybe shave a little bit here and there, how you can maybe utilize what you're spending a bit more, whether it's a case of, if you look at your business in terms of pound per animal, or whether you look at it in pound per hectare, you look at that utilization of your costs essentially, as it would be the first step for me before you then look on other aspects of it.
Great, thank you. There's just one more question on the screen, so if anyone has any further questions, please type these in now. So the next question is, do you have any examples of the innovations the top performing farms are demonstrating? So,
there's a case study in the report, which unfortunately I don't have to hand to go through, but it's definitely worth having a look through. But it's not a case of innovations that they're necessarily doing, it's more good business practice that the top performers are doing. It's having that ability to take a step back from the day to day, because yes, the day to day is important, but if you say there's a fence needs fixing, then yeah, if you fix that fence, then that job's done for the day. But in terms of the business effect, it might not have that big impact that taking a step back and looking at the accounts and looking at your benchmarking, or doing a budget, or those kind of things will have. And attending a discussion group, sort of, I don't know, well, however many times a year would actually suit you, but say for a basis 4 times a year, that will have a much bigger impact than any big new innovation that's occurring. So it's more about having good business practice and applying it, and being strict with yourself as well, because it's so easy to fall back into the day to day if you were to start doing this stuff. But really being strict to go, well, actually, if I keep on with this longer term, it will benefit so much more than having the blinkers on and just doing that day-to-day stuff. So there isn't a silver bullet or a be all and end all that necessarily is going to be a game changer. It is fundamentally those good business practices.
Great, thanks, Luke. A few more questions have come through. So the first one is, for young farmers entering the dairy industry, how would you approach benchmarking?
Depending on what stage you are. So if you're looking to enter the industry and you've currently got a family business, and maybe you're looking to try and get a bit more control over that business, and you've got an idea of how you want to do that, then sort of benchmarking is a good way, combining that with budgets and goals to sort of test your ideas theoretically first, by looking at using benchmarking to look at what other people are doing similar to the ideas you want to do, and what sort of results they're achieving. But then also, if it's maybe a fresh new idea, using data available to give you a bit of an indication over what that idea might be, to present a financial or potential financial implication, rather than just going with the idea, could be a good selling point to get further into that business. If you're a young farmer setting up completely new, you'd probably learn a hell of a lot of whatever college or university you've been to, or any work experience that you've done, but still continuing that path in terms of going to meetings, looking at what you're doing, because everyone makes mistakes. We shouldn't be scared of making mistakes, but when you do make them, it's about how you learn from them. And I'd go into meetings and discussing what you've done and what you might change, or what you've done differently. I personally do think that's a great way of doing it, because you able to share what you've done and learn from other people in that regards, and real life examples, rather than just what you're doing, or reading things out of a book. So attending meetings would probably be number one for either side of that, those examples that I've just talked about.
Great, thanks, Luke. Another question, do the top performers pay staff the highest wages?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm going to assume not, purely because I when I looked at stuff from a business point outside of agriculture, that hasn't been the case. It's not all about the money side of things. A lot of it's about staff satisfaction as well. Because if you were to say someone's on X thousand a year, and they're not happy, and you up their salary, they'll be happy for a little bit, but they'll be on that salary for a little bit, and then they'll kind of go, well, actually, I kind of want more money. And if you keep chucking money at the job, it's not going to work out. So actually trying to see what it is that they want to achieve, because there's so many different things that make us tick. For some people, it could be a case of increased responsibility. For some people, it could be a case of a better work-life balance. So there's various different factors. So it's important to engage with people to understand what it is they're looking to achieve. Now, some people is all about the money, and if you've got someone like that in your business, there's potential that maybe they're not actually right for your business, and it's important to understand that as well, to get the right people involved in what you're doing. But I wouldn't think that they're all paying the most, from gut instinct, although I don't fully know, purely because I think there's loads more other factors that would affect it.
Perfect, thank you. Coming on to the last two questions now. So final reminder, if anyone still wants to ask a question, to type those in. And just as I speak, there's more popping up. So there's just a comment here that just stating that it seems that the focus is on shaving cost, which could give the wrong impressions when farmers may be required to invest to make gains. So there's an example provided by Kevin. A focus on animal mobility could increase costs, but overall fertility and yield would suppress the extra cost involved. So I don't know if you just want to comment on that, Luke.
Yeah, if I have given that impression, I'm sorry. It's not all about reducing cost, because sometimes you need to spend money to make money, essentially in some areas. So no, it is not all about driving cost, but it's about minimizing the cost as much as possible. So if you do need to spend more, it's not about it should be about not spending more than you need to in that regards. And if you can focus on the detail side of things and really look at what it is you're doing, it might be that you are spending a bit more money. For example, when I spoke about a farmer doing the accounts who might not be as good at it than if they paid someone. Actually, if they pay someone to do it, it's a cost that's coming more to the business, and it's seen on the accounts. But actually, it's helping the business because it's giving the farmer that much many hours back to focus their attention on elsewhere that they're much more suited to and better at. So no, it's not all about reduce cost, and be as cheap as possible. It's about how you can utilize that in the best possible way. And when you look at things, I mean, I would strongly suggest if someone says to you, what's your business performance? I wouldn't say I've got X amount of cows and I produce X amount of milk. And also on the flip side, I wouldn't say my cost of production is Y. I would say my margin is Z. Margin is the key for this, to understand where your business is. And that's kind of what goes back to that. That's why it's all not about reducing costs as much as possible, but it's about utilization, much more than just being cheap.
Great, thanks, Luke. Just a few questions left on the screen. So one is asking, I was wondering if you are aware of any tools for assessing a farm business to identify the best area to concentrate on. So I'm guessing that's to concentrate on the improvement.
Yeah, so on our website we have a sort of a resilience checklist tool, and it looks at these kind of 8 factors, and it asks a question, and it gives you a rating out of 5, essentially to see where you are. And what that does at the end is it throws up a bit of a score to say, well, you scored lowly in this particular section. Maybe you want to look at some of these tools that might help boost it up. Now, that's not a case of if you score a 1 in one area, you have to then, that's your number one focus. But it gives you a bit of that guidance to where maybe to focus a bit more. Excuse me, but it's not. A lot of this is purely down to what it is you want to achieve from your business. So there's lots of tools out there, and that checklist is a great starting point, like I say, which is available on the website, resilience checklist. But then it's a case of how you're looking to run with that, and and how you're looking to use those tools available to push on to that next level of where you want to go.
Perfect, thank you. There's a couple of questions come through in regard to into salary when you were answering that question. So I'll just put these together. Have you got any guidance on setting performance related bonuses to get the best commitment from staff is the first one. And the second one also related is, how do you determine what the correct wage is for a position?
Well, a benchmarking would be to a degree essentially where you could look at your what the best wage is to advertise it out. Asking people that are in the business as well what they're paying staff. So looking at it from that angle would probably be the best way to look at an overall an overall guidance of what to pay people. But you also do get a sense of guidance that if you're offering a salary and you get no one apply for it, then maybe the salary isn't right, or maybe it's a case of location. So it's a hard one to necessarily achieve, but there are a couple of little ways of doing it. There isn't a sort of be all end all guide for that as far as I'm aware. So it would purely be a case of benchmarking and talking to people about it. In terms of bonuses, well, it's whatever's comfortable for your business, really. If you've got a goal set up of where you want to go in the next sort of, say, 5 years, and you've got KPIs every year of what you wanted to hit, if you've given someone a responsibility for, say, one or two of those KPIs and they keep hitting them year on year, then if you're comfortable to giving them a bit more money, then it's whatever's suited to your business. Now, there are businesses out there that say give X percent of the turnover based on performance, and there's different models that might be applicable, but it is fundamentally down to what it is you're comfortable with. And it might be that you just sit down at the end of your financial year and say, well, you know what, I think you've done a fantastic job. Here's however much money on top of your salary because you've helped us out a lot and you've really stuck by it. But I wouldn't go back to the previous point. I wouldn't say that the finance is the be all and end all. I would probably look at offering, you know, maybe finance is an aspect of it, but offering, you know, things like, oh, you've done really well, and you're looking to do a course in this, whatever this might be. We're gonna pay for you to go on that. Those kind of things would also be worthwhile looking at. But it's such a woolly answer, and I apologize for that, but it really does come down to your individual business and what it is you're prepared to do and wanting to do.
Perfect, thanks, Luke. And our final question for tonight is, generally, what depreciation policies do the top farms employ?
It's
A tricky one to finish on.
Yeah. I wouldn't know exactly what they do. In terms of depreciation, like machinery and things, we have tools available at AHDB that can be utilised, but I'm guessing it is a blanket thing. I don't think they would. I can't think off the top of my head why they would be doing things differently in that regards, or massively differently. Whether it's in terms of maybe they're looking, maybe the top guys might be getting slightly older machinery and building them up. If it's depreciation in that regard, the question was referring to. But to be honest, I'm not sure. If you want to ping whoever asked the question, if you want to ping me the question directly with maybe a bit more content behind it, then I can certainly look into it a bit more. But to be honest, off the top of my head now, I'm not 100% sure. So apologies for that.
Thanks,
not the best way to end.
So Charles, that was your question. So if that hasn't given you the answer, just drop Luke an email or email the email address that you got the link to the webinar, and we'll get back to you on that one. So just to round up, I'd just like to thank you all for listening. We've had a great turnout and participation in this webinar tonight. Please keep an eye out on the AHDB events page for future webinars. And a very special thank you to Luke for taking the time out of his busy day. The recording of this webinar will be available to watch back on the AHDB website in due course. All of those that have registered will receive an email alerting you when it is live on the website. Thank you all and good night.